The air was thick with the warm scent of sunscreen and the faint tang of chlorine. It was the kind of summer afternoon when even the pavement seemed to shimmer in the heat. The neighborhood pool lay ahead like a sparkling promise, its turquoise, water catching the sunlight and sending glints into the eyes of anyone who looked too long. Malik was practically bouncing with each step he took. He was 11 years old, tall for his age, but still carrying that unshaped lankiness of a boy not yet grown. In one hand, he held a pair of swim goggles that had been his favorite for 2 summers in a row. They were a little scratched now. The elastic strap faded from too many hours in the sun, but to him, they were perfect. He had been waiting all week for this moment. His mother worked long hours, and Malik didn't always get to the pool as often as he wanted. But this Saturday was different. She had promised to take him after lunch, and true to her word, here they were. The plan was simple. Malik would practice his freestyle stroke, the one he had been learning by watching videos online. He couldn't afford swimming lessons, but he had been teaching himself little by little, proud of every improvement. The closer they got, the more the sound of splashing and laughter filled the air. It was like music to Malik's ears. Children shouted in joy as they jumped into the deep end. The lifeguard's whistle pierced through the noise now and then, followed by the thud of feet moving quickly to the correct side of the pool. The smell of hot dogs drifted over from a small snack stand, mixing with the sweetness of melting ice pops. Malik's excitement bubbled up inside him. He walked a little faster, pulling ahead of his mother. "Come on, Mom," he called over his shoulder with a grin. "You're too slow." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're the one who begged for this, Malik. Don't leave me behind before we even get inside." At the gate, Malik fished out his seasonal pass from the small pocket of his backpack. The card had his name printed neatly across the front, in black letters, along with the photo they had taken on the first day of summer. He felt proud holding it, like it was proof that he belonged here just like everyone else. The lifeguard on duty was a tall young man with a deep tan and mirrored sunglasses that hid his eyes. His red shirt bore the word staff in large white letters. Malik stepped up to the entrance, already imagining the cool water against his skin. The lifeguard held out a hand, palm facing Malik. "Hold up," he said in a flat tone. Malik stopped, a little surprised. "I've got my pass," he said quickly, offering the card. The lifeguard didn't take it. He just looked at Malik for a moment, then at the pool, then back again. "Not today," he said. Malik blinked. "Why not?" He glanced down at his pass again, as if maybe he'd picked up the wrong card. But it was his name, his picture. Everything was right. "My pass is fine," he said, his voice careful. The lifeguard shrugged. "Rules. Can't let you in today." "What rules?" Malik asked, his brow furrowing. The lifeguard didn't answer right away. He glanced toward a group of kids splashing each other near the shallow end. "Just rules," he said again, as though that was explanation enough. Malik felt his mother step up beside him. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice polite but firm. The lifeguard didn't meet her eyes. "I just can't let him in today, that's all." A knot formed in Malik's stomach. He could still hear the happy chaos of the pool, but now it felt distant, like it was happening in a world he wasn't allowed to reach. His fingers tightened around the strap of his backpack. All week he had been thinking about this, practicing, his breathing, imagining himself slicing through the water like the swimmers he'd seen online. And now, this. Around them, people were coming and going. Most didn't seem to notice what was happening. A couple of kids ran past with wet hair, plastered to their foreheads, giggling as they dripped water onto the hot pavement. Malik wanted so badly to be one of them. His mother tried again. "We paid for this pass. My son has been looking forward to swimming all week. If there's a problem, I'd like to know exactly what it is." The lifeguard shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing new. Malik stared at the ground, his ears burning. He didn't understand why this was happening. All he knew was that the joy he'd carried here was slipping away, replaced by something heavy and sharp. Inside the pool area, a boy about Malik's age was racing his friend to the diving board. Malik's chest ached watching them. The goggles in his hand felt suddenly useless. The sun was still shining, the laughter still ringing out. But for Malik, the summer afternoon had changed. The pool, which moments ago had seemed so welcoming, now stood like a closed door, and he was left, standing on the wrong side. Malik's excitement had started to fade, replaced by confusion that felt heavier with each passing moment. The lifeguard still stood in front of him, his arm resting on the metal gate as if guarding a treasure Malik wasn't allowed to touch. The sun was bright overhead, but the shadow from the lifeguard's frame seemed to dim everything around him. Malik's mother, Aisha, took a slow breath. Her voice was calm, but there was a firmness in it now. "Can you please explain why my son isn't allowed to swim? We have the seasonal pass. We've never had a problem before." The lifeguard adjusted his sunglasses and glanced toward the snack stand as if looking for someone else to handle the conversation. "I don't make the rules," he said at last. "Management says who can come in and who can't. That's it." "Then maybe you should get your manager," Aisha said, standing her ground. The lifeguard's jaw tightened, and for a moment Malik thought he might actually call someone. But instead, the man shook his head slightly. "They're busy, right now." His tone carried that finality people used when they didn't want to be challenged. Malik shifted from one foot to the other, his fingers nervously tracing the edges of his swim goggles. He didn't want to make a scene. He didn't like people staring. But his stomach was churning, and a small voice inside kept asking, "Why me?" From behind them, two teenagers walked up to the gate, dripping water onto the pavement. They flashed their cards, and the lifeguard opened the gate without hesitation. They didn't even have to slow down. Malik watched them go, their laughter echoing as they jogged toward the deep end. His mother noticed too. "So they can go in, but my son can't?" The lifeguard didn't answer. He looked past them, scanning the parking lot for the next person in line. "Come on, Malik," Aisha said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure something out." But Malik didn't move. His eyes were locked on the pool just beyond the fence. The water shimmered in the sunlight, and the smell of chlorine teased him like a memory he couldn't quite reach. He thought about the hours he had spent this week practicing his kicks in the bathtub, pretending he was gliding through open water. All for nothing. "Why can't I go in, Mom?" he whispered, his voice breaking a little. Aisha looked down at him, her heart twisting. "I don't know, baby, but it's not right." A few people nearby began to notice the tension. A woman carrying a toddler slowed her pace, glancing between the lifeguard and Malik's mother. A couple of older men sitting at the shaded picnic table turned their heads to watch. Malik felt heat rise in his cheeks, not from the sun, but from the uncomfortable awareness that strangers were seeing him like this, standing at the gate, unwanted. He lowered his gaze to his sneakers. They were dusty from walking the short distance from home. His toes curled inside them, restless. The lifeguard cleared his throat. "I told you, management's rules. Nothing personal." Nothing personal. Malik turned the words over in his head. How could it not be personal? It was him being turned away. It was his Saturday afternoon being ruined. It was his chance to swim slipping away. Somewhere behind the gate, a whistle blew again, and a group of kids climbed out of the shallow end to line up for the diving board. Their laughter was loud, carefree. Malik felt it like a sting. Aisha pulled out her phone. "If you're not going to let us in, then I want to speak to whoever's in charge. Now." The lifeguard hesitated, his mouth opening as if to argue, but before he could say anything, a shadow moved on the far side of the pool deck. Malik caught a glimpse of a woman in a wide-brimmed hat, walking toward the small office near the snack stand. The lifeguard noticed, too, and something flickered in his expression. Annoyance, maybe, or worry. "Fine," he muttered, stepping away from the gate. "Wait here." Malik and his mother stood in silence as he walked toward the office. The seconds stretched long. Malik tried to distract himself by watching the ripples in the pool water, the way sunlight broke into 1,000 shifting diamonds on its surface. But his chest still felt tight. The joy he'd carried here was slipping through his fingers like sand. Aisha reached into her bag and handed him a small bottle of water. "Drink," she said gently. "It's hot out." He took it, though he wasn't thirsty. He twisted the cap, took a sip, and let the cool liquid sit in his mouth before swallowing. From somewhere nearby came the sound of pages turning. Malik glanced to his left and noticed an older woman sitting on a shaded bench. She wore a light blue dress and held a thick paperback in her lap. Her hair was silver, pulled back neatly, and she wore glasses that rested low on her nose. She was watching them, her expression thoughtful. Malik looked away quickly, embarrassed to have been caught in someone's attention. The lifeguard returned a moment later. "Manager's not coming out right now," he said. "They're busy. With something else." Aisha stared at him in disbelief. "So you're telling me we just wasted our time walking here? That my son can't use the pool we paid for?" "That's what I'm telling you," the lifeguard said, his tone flat. Malik wanted to say something to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. He felt small, like the air around him was too heavy to breathe. His mother put her arm around him. "Let's go, Malik," she said again, her voice quiet but trembling with frustration. They turned away from the gate, walking back toward the sidewalk. Malik glanced over his shoulder one last time at the shimmering water, his goggles, still clutched in his hand. But just before they reached the street, the woman on the shaded bench closed her book and stood. Malik walked beside his mother, his steps slower now, almost dragging. The joy that had made him race ahead earlier had vanished, replaced by a heavy weight in his chest. The goggles in his hand no longer felt like a key to summer fun. They felt like a reminder of what he was being denied. He could still hear the sounds of the pool behind him, splashes, laughter, the sharp calls of children daring each other to jump from the highest step of the diving board. But instead of making him smile, those sounds now made him feel smaller, like he was standing on the outside of a world that didn't want him. Aisha's face was tight with frustration, but she stayed silent for a moment, not wanting to let her anger spill in front of her son. She kept glancing back toward the lifeguard at the gate, as if trying to figure out what exactly had just happened. Malik kicked at a loose pebble on the sidewalk. It skittered across the concrete and stopped at the base of the fence. He wished he could hide inside the cool blue water instead of baking under the sun, feeling all the eyes that seemed to be following them. He wasn't imagining it. People were looking. Near the snack stand, a group of parents leaned in close, murmuring to each other as they glanced toward the gate. On the grass, two kids who had been tossing a beach ball stopped to watch Malik and his mother walk away. Malik's ears burned. He hated being the center of attention like this, especially when it wasn't for something good. He imagined what people might be thinking. Maybe they think I did something wrong. Maybe they think I broke a rule. But he hadn't. He'd done nothing wrong. That thought twisted in his chest, mixing with confusion and a quiet, stinging sadness. Aisha finally broke the silence. "Don't let it get to you, Malik. This isn't your fault." He nodded but didn't speak. It still felt like his fault somehow. The sun pressed down harder, making the pavement radiate heat. Malik's t-shirt clung to his back. The water bottle in his hand was already warm, but he took a sip anyway, hoping it would calm the dry lump in his throat. Behind them, the lifeguard had returned to his post. Malik glanced back just in time to see him scanning the crowd again, letting in a family with 2 kids who looked excited and carefree. No questions, no hesitation. Malik turned forward quickly, not wanting to watch anymore. As they reached the shady patch near the benches, Aisha slowed. Her eyes flickered toward the older woman who had been reading earlier. The woman had closed her book now and was sitting with her hands resting lightly on the cover. Her gaze was calm but sharp, like she had been paying close attention to everything that had happened. Malik avoided looking at her directly, afraid she might pity him. He didn't want pity. He wanted fairness. But then the woman stood, and something in her movements made Malik's mother pause. She wasn't rushing over, but there was a quiet purpose in her steps. Before she could speak, a burst of laughter from the pool drew Malik's eyes again. A group of kids about his age were splashing each other in the shallow end, their shouts full of carefree energy. He had imagined himself there all week, practicing his new swimming technique, racing from one side to the other. Now it felt like watching a dream he could never touch. The embarrassment swelled. Malik shifted his weight from foot to foot, wishing he could just disappear. "I hate this," he muttered under his breath. His mother's hand gently squeezed his shoulder. "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes people will try to stop you for no good reason, and sometimes someone else might notice and speak up." Malik didn't know what she meant at first, until the woman from the bench finally reached them. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice warm but steady. "I couldn't help overhearing what just happened at the gate." Malik looked up at her, startled. Her silver hair glinted in the sunlight, and there was a kindness in her eyes that made him feel a little less tense. She looked at Aisha, then back at Malik. "You have a pool pass, don't you?" Malik nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." "And they didn't give you a reason for keeping you out?" she asked. Aisha shook her head. "No reason, just rules." The woman's lips pressed together, her expression sharpening. "That's not how this should work." She turned slightly, glancing toward the lifeguard still standing at the gate. "I think someone needs to be reminded of that." Malik's stomach fluttered, half from hope, half from worry. He wasn't sure if he wanted anyone to make a bigger scene. But something in the woman's confident tone made him stand a little straighter. She glanced back at them. "Stay right here," she said gently. "I'll be back in a moment." Malik watched her walk toward the gate, her book still tucked under her arm. She wasn't fast, but her steps were certain, and people began to notice her approach. The murmur of voices around the pool started to shift, growing quieter as the older woman stopped in front of the lifeguard. Malik couldn't hear what she said yet, but he could see the lifeguard stiffen slightly. Aisha crossed her arms. "Looks like you might get your swim after all," she murmured. But Malik didn't answer. He was too focused on the scene unfolding at the gate. Somehow the embarrassment he had felt a moment ago began to mix with something else, something like anticipation. The woman's sandals clicked softly against the hot pavement as she made her way to the pool gate. Her pace was steady, neither rushed nor hesitant, but there was something in her posture, shoulders straight, chin lifted, that made her presence impossible to ignore. Malik and Aisha stood near the benches, watching closely. The older woman, Mrs. Thompson, had been a familiar face around the neighborhood for years. Malik recognized her now. She often volunteered at the community center, sometimes helping kids with their homework or reading to them in the library corner. She reached the gate and stopped just in front of the lifeguard. He was leaning back, against the post, scanning the crowd inside, but his attention quickly shifted when she spoke. "Good afternoon," Mrs. Thompson said. Her voice was polite, but there was no mistaking the strength beneath it. "I was sitting over there, reading my book, and I noticed this young man," she nodded toward Malik, "was denied entry to the pool." The lifeguard shifted slightly, adjusting the strap of his whistle around his neck. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his tone flat. "He can't come in today. Management's rules." "Rules?" Mrs. Thompson tilted her head. "Could you show me where those rules are written? I'm quite familiar with the community guidelines, and I don't recall anything that would prevent a boy with a valid pass from swimming." The lifeguard's jaw moved, but no words came out for a moment. He glanced toward the office, then back at her. "It's just what I was told." "I see," Mrs. Thompson said, her gaze steady. "And you didn't think it necessary to explain the exact reason to him or his mother?" The lifeguard's lips pressed together. Around them, a few people had slowed their steps, pretending to check their phones or fix their towels while clearly listening in. "I didn't want to cause a scene," the lifeguard muttered. Mrs. Thompson gave a small, almost amused smile. "A scene is caused when someone is treated unfairly, not when someone asks for fairness." Malik's eyes widened. He wasn't used to hearing adults speak like that in public, calm but sharp enough to cut through the noise. His mother stood beside him, her arms still crossed, her gaze fixed on the exchange. The lifeguard crossed his arms now, too, perhaps trying to make himself seem more in control. "Like I said, I'm just following what I was told. You can take it up with management." "Oh, I will," Mrs. Thompson said, nodding. "But in the meantime, this child is standing outside on a hot day with a paid pass, while others are allowed in without question. That's not something I'm willing to ignore." Malik felt a shift in the air. It wasn't just the heat anymore. There was a quiet tension, like the moment before a summer storm. Mrs. Thompson took a step closer to the gate. "You see, young man," she continued, "I've lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years. I've taught hundreds of children here, and I've been to this pool more times than I can count. This is public property, maintained by community funds, which means every member has equal rights to use it. Unless you can point to an official rule that says otherwise, this boy should be allowed in right now." The lifeguard shifted again, his shoulders tightening. He looked over toward the snack stand where the woman in the wide-brimmed hat, the manager, was still speaking to another staff member. It was clear he didn't want to involve her. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," Mrs. Thompson added, her tone still calm but firmer now. "I'm asking for what is fair and right. The boy has his pass. He's done nothing wrong. Denying him entry without reason is unacceptable." A few voices in the small crowd nearby murmured in agreement. Someone said quietly, "Yeah, that's not right." Another added, "He's got a pass. Let him in." Malik felt his heart thump a little faster. He wasn't used to strangers speaking up for him. It was like a small light flickering in the middle of a dark room. The lifeguard glanced around. It was clear he was realizing more people were paying attention. His earlier confidence seemed to falter. He ran a hand over the back of his neck, the sun glinting off his sunglasses. Mrs. Thompson waited, giving him space to answer. Her silence was almost heavier than her words. Finally, the lifeguard sighed. "Fine," he said, his tone reluctant. "He can go in." Mrs. Thompson's expression softened slightly, but her eyes didn't leave his. "Thank you," she said simply, and stepped back. She turned toward Malik and Aisha. "Go ahead, dear," she told Malik, her voice warmer now. "Enjoy your swim." Malik blinked, surprised at how quickly things had changed. His legs felt stiff, like they needed a moment to remember how to move. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. The lifeguard pushed open the gate, and Malik walked past, his goggles still clutched tightly in his hand. As he crossed the threshold, the cool smell of chlorine seemed stronger, and the laughter from the pool sounded closer, no longer distant and unreachable. He turned back just enough to look at Mrs. Thompson. She gave him a small nod, the kind that carried more weight than words. Aisha placed a hand on his back. "Go on," she said softly. "I'll find a seat and watch you?" Malik took a deep breath and walked toward the shallow end, feeling a mix of relief and something else. Gratitude, maybe, or pride that someone had cared enough to speak up for him. Behind him, Mrs. Thompson returned to her shaded bench. But she didn't open her book again. Instead, she sat with her hands folded, watching the pool deck with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had done the right thing. Malik knew this afternoon would stay in his memory for a long time. Not just because he got to swim, but because a stranger had stepped closer when it mattered most. The moment Malik stepped through the gate, the sunlight seemed different, less sharp, less heavy. The cool scent of chlorine filled his lungs, and the sounds of splashing felt nearer, almost welcoming. Still, the weight of what had just happened clung to him. He walked slowly toward the shallow end, his sandals making soft, slapping sounds against the wet pavement. Around him, children laughed, parents chatted, and lifeguards perched on tall chairs watched over the water. From the outside, it looked like a normal summer day, but Malik knew his day had almost been stolen before it could begin. Aisha followed him to the edge of the pool. She set her bag on a nearby chair, her eyes scanning the water. Malik knelt down to dip his fingers in. The cool touch made him want to jump in right away, but something inside him still felt unsettled. A splash landed nearby, and Malik turned to see a boy about his age waving. "Hey, you gonna swim?" the boy called. Malik nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yeah." As he adjusted his goggles, he glanced back toward the gate. Mrs. Thompson was still standing near the entrance, speaking calmly to a small group of people who had gathered. The lifeguard kept his distance, pretending to watch the pool, but clearly listening. Malik couldn't hear all the words, but the tone was steady, strong. Mrs. Thompson was speaking out, not just for him, but for what was right. The conversation carried just enough for Malik to catch a few phrases: equal access, community rules, respect for all members. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. The way she spoke made people want to listen. Malik's chest warmed, though not from the heat of the day. He had never seen someone defend him like that before, especially someone who didn't owe him anything. Aisha came to stand beside him. "You see her?" she asked quietly, tilting her chin toward Mrs. Thompson. Malik nodded. "That's what courage looks like," Aisha said. "It's not about being the loudest person. It's about standing up when you know something isn't right." Malik looked back at the water. He wanted to dive in, but he also wanted to keep watching, to remember this moment. Mrs. Thompson finished speaking and glanced toward Malik. Their eyes met briefly. She smiled, then gave a small nod as if to say, "Go on. Enjoy yourself." Taking a deep breath, Malik stepped down the metal ladder into the pool. The cold water wrapped around his ankles, then his knees, then his waist. For a moment, all the tension in his shoulders eased. He pushed off into the water, letting himself glide. It wasn't the fastest lap, but it felt like freedom. Each kick and stroke sent ripples through the surface, washing away a little more of the hurt he'd felt at the gate. A group of younger kids splashed nearby, their laughter light and unbothered. Malik joined a lane closer to the center, practicing the freestyle stroke he'd been working on all week. He focused on his breathing. Inhale when turning to the side, exhale in the water. Every now and then he would glance toward the gate. Mrs. Thompson had returned to her shaded bench, her book open again. But Malik knew she wasn't just reading. She was keeping an eye on things, making sure the lifeguard didn't try something like that again. After several laps, Malik climbed out to rest. The sun warmed his damp skin as he sat on the edge, feet still in the water. Aisha handed him a towel and a small snack from her bag. "You look better," she said. Malik shrugged, though a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "It feels good to swim. It feels good to be where you belong," Aisha corrected gently. Malik thought about that. Belonging. It wasn't just about having a pass or paying a fee. It was about knowing you had the same right to be somewhere as anyone else. That was what Mrs. Thompson had fought for without even being asked. A few minutes later, the boy who had waved earlier swam up to Malik. "Want a race?" he asked. Malik grinned. "Sure." They lined up at the edge, and with a quick countdown from another kid, they both dove forward. Water splashed high, and Malik's arms cut through the surface with smooth, practiced strokes. The other boy was fast, but Malik's determination pushed him forward. They reached the end almost together, both gasping and laughing. "You're good," the boy said, pushing his wet hair back. "Thanks," Malik replied, feeling a small burst of pride. As they swam back, Malik noticed the lifeguard glance at him briefly before looking away. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was a change. Less guarded, more aware. When Malik climbed out again, Mrs. Thompson was leaving her bench. She walked slowly along the pool deck until she reached him. "Having a good swim?" she asked. Malik nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for what you did." Her eyes softened. "You don't need to thank me, Malik. Everyone deserves fairness. Sometimes we just have to remind people of that." Malik's mother smiled at her. "You reminded a lot of people today." Mrs. Thompson chuckled. "Well, I suppose so. Now, you keep swimming. And remember, you belong anywhere your hard work and honesty take you." With that, she headed toward the exit, leaving Malik with words that felt like they'd stay in his mind for a long time. The rest of the afternoon passed in the rhythm of splashes, laughter, and sunlight on the water. But for Malik, it wasn't just about the swimming anymore. It was about knowing that even when someone tries to close a door, there might be another person willing to hold it open. The sun had started to lean lower in the sky, casting long golden streaks over the pool water. Malik floated on his back, eyes half closed, listening to the muffled sounds around him. The laughter, the splashes, and the steady hum of summer were no longer weighed down by the tension from earlier. But inside, Malik felt something shifting. It wasn't just relief. It was something deeper, like a new kind of strength had quietly taken root. He rolled over and swam toward the deep end, his strokes strong and even. The boy he had raced earlier joined him. "Want to try diving?" the boy asked. Malik hesitated. The diving board had always looked exciting but intimidating. He'd never actually tried it in front of so many people. But today, something inside whispered, "Why not?" "Okay," Malik said. They climbed out and walked over to the board. A few kids lined up behind them, chatting and laughing. Malik stepped onto the rough surface of the board, feeling it bounce lightly beneath his feet. From the corner of his eye, he noticed the lifeguard watching, not with suspicion, but simply doing his job. For the first time that day, Malik didn't feel small under that gaze. He took a deep breath, ran a few steps, and leapt. The air whooshed past him before the cool water swallowed him whole. He went deep, then kicked hard toward the surface. When his head broke through, he heard cheers from nearby kids. Even Aisha clapped from her chair. Malik grinned, feeling a spark of pride light up inside him. "Nice one," the boy called. "Thanks," Malik replied, his voice carrying over the water. They spent the next hour diving, racing, and laughing with the others. Malik noticed something strange. After a while, it didn't matter who had been a stranger that morning. Here in the pool, everyone was just kids having fun. Still, the moment at the gate lingered in his mind, not with the same sharp hurt, but as a memory that had been transformed. It was no longer just about being denied. It was about what had followed. As the day went on, more parents gathered along the shaded benches. A few had clearly heard about what happened earlier. Malik caught bits of their conversations, some people shaking their heads, others quietly agreeing with Mrs. Thompson's stand. One mother approached Aisha while Malik rested at the edge of the pool. "Your son's a strong swimmer," she said warmly. "Thank you," Aisha replied. "He's been working hard all summer." The woman nodded. "I'm glad he's here. Kids need places like this, and they need to know they're welcome." Her words added another layer of warmth. To the afternoon, Malik realized that Mrs. Thompson's stand hadn't just helped him, it had reminded other people of something important. Near closing time, the lifeguard walked past Malik and stopped for a second. His voice was quiet, almost awkward. "You're a good swimmer." Malik looked up, surprised. "Thanks." The lifeguard nodded and moved on. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. Malik understood something in that moment. Sometimes change begins with small steps. When the whistle blew to signal closing time, Malik climbed out of the pool, dripping and tired but lighter in spirit. The air felt cooler now, the heat of the day easing into evening. He and Aisha packed their things, but before leaving, Malik turned back for one last look. The pool shimmered under the fading light, and the sounds of people chatting and packing up made the place feel like part of a shared memory. Mrs. Thompson was nowhere in sight now, but her presence was still strong in Malik's heart. He thought about how quickly she had acted, how confidently she had spoken, and how she had left without asking for thanks or recognition. As they walked toward the exit, Malik said, "Mom, do you think I could help someone like that one day?" Aisha smiled. "I think you already can. You just have to keep your eyes open for the moments that matter." Malik nodded. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he knew this day had changed him. Not just because he'd been defended, but because he had seen how one person's action could shift the course of events for the better. The street outside the pool was quiet except for the chirp of crickets starting up in the grass. Malik glanced back one more time before they reached the car. The gate stood open, just like it had when they finally walked in earlier. It was just a gate, metal and plain. But now, to Malik, it looked like a symbol, a reminder that doors should open, not close, for anyone who belongs there. As they drove home, Malik rested his head against the window, watching the town pass by. The setting sun painted the sky in orange and pink, and the reflection danced across his eyes. He felt tired in the best way, the kind of tired that comes from a day well lived, and beneath that tiredness was a quiet determination. He didn't know when or where, but someday he would be the one to stand up for someone else. Today, Mrs. Thompson had been the voice. Tomorrow, maybe it would be him. The next morning, Malik woke up earlier than usual. Sunlight was spilling through his bedroom curtains, painting the walls with a soft golden glow. The memory of the pool was fresh in his mind, the cool splash of water, the cheers after his dive, and Mrs. Thompson's calm but powerful voice standing up for him. He lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The hurt from being stopped at the gate had faded, replaced by something warmer, a kind of pride and gratitude. But there was also a new feeling stirring inside him, something he didn't have a name for yet. Downstairs, the smell of toast drifted through the house. Malik went into the kitchen to find his mother, Aisha, sitting with a cup of tea. She smiled when she saw him. "Good morning," she said. "Morning," Malik replied, taking a seat. They ate quietly for a moment before Malik spoke again. "Mom, do you think Mrs. Thompson goes around helping people all the time?" Aisha smiled softly. "I think she helps when she sees it's needed. Some people don't wait for someone else to do the right thing. They just do it themselves." Malik thought about that. "I want to be like that." "You can be," she said. "It starts with paying attention to others and being brave enough to speak when it matters." After breakfast, Malik grabbed his notebook. Normally, he used it for drawing, but today he felt like writing. On the first page, he wrote, "Be like Mrs. Thompson." Then, underneath, he wrote a list of moments where he could try to help someone, sharing lunch with a classmate who forgot theirs, standing up for a friend if someone teased them, helping a neighbor carry groceries. It wasn't a long list, but it was a start. That afternoon, Malik and Aisha went for a walk through the neighborhood. It was one of those slow summer days where the air felt lazy and time seemed to move more gently. As they passed the park, Malik saw two younger kids trying to reach a basketball hoop. They weren't tall enough to get the ball anywhere near it. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "Want me to lift you so you can dunk it?" Malik asked. The younger boy's face lit up. "Yeah." Malik crouched down and let the boy climb onto his back. With a little boost, the boy was able to toss the ball through the hoop. His laughter rang out across the park. "Thanks," the boy said, running back to his friend. Aisha, watching from the sidewalk, smiled. She didn't say anything, but her eyes said everything. Malik felt that same warmth from the pool return. Small, but powerful. A few days later, Malik returned to the pool with Aisha. This time, he didn't feel nervous when they approached the gate. The lifeguard nodded at them, no questions asked. Inside, he saw a few familiar faces from last time, including the boy he had raced. They waved him over, and soon they were all laughing and splashing again like old friends. But Malik also noticed something else. Two other kids, a boy and a girl, standing near the shallow end looking uncertain. Their swimsuits were new, and they clutched towels nervously. He remembered how it felt to stand on the outside, not knowing if you belonged, so he swam over. "Hey," he said. "Want to play a game?" The boy's eyes brightened. "What game?" Race to the other side. Winner gets to make up the next challenge. They agreed, and in moments, the awkwardness was gone. The kids were smiling, splashing, and trying to outswim each other. Malik didn't win every race, but he didn't care. Something about helping them feel welcome felt better than winning. That night, as Malik and Aisha walked home from the pool, the air was cooler, carrying the faint smell of freshly cut grass. Malik thought about how different he felt compared to that first day. He had learned something important, that courage wasn't only about standing up for yourself. Sometimes, it was about standing up for someone else even if you didn't know them. Mrs. Thompson had taught him that. And now, in his own small ways, he was trying to pass it on. "Mom," he said as they neared their house, "do you think Mrs. Thompson even remembers me?" Aisha smiled. "I think she remembers what she did. And maybe, just maybe, she hopes you'll do the same for someone else." Malik thought about that as he stepped inside, the cool air of home wrapping around him. He knew that someday he would find himself in a moment where he had to choose, to speak or to stay silent. And when that moment came, he wanted to choose the way Mrs. Thompson had. Weeks passed, and summer began to fade into the edges of autumn. School started and life moved on, but the memory of that day at the pool stayed with Malik like a bookmark in his mind. Sometimes during recess, he would see a kid sitting alone and invite them to join his game. Other times, he'd help a classmate who was struggling with homework. They weren't grand gestures, but they were real. And each time, he felt that same sense of quiet strength. One evening, while helping Aisha bring in groceries, Malik noticed Mrs. Thompson walking down the sidewalk carrying a bag of oranges. Without thinking, he jogged over. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson," he called. She stopped, surprised. "Hello there. Oh, I remember you. The pool, right?" Malik nodded. "Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for that day." She smiled, her eyes warm. "I'm glad it made a difference." "It did," Malik said. "And I've been trying to help people too, like you did for me." Her smile grew. "That's the best thank you I could ask for." They chatted for a moment before parting ways. As Malik carried the groceries inside, he felt something settle in his chest. A quiet confidence that this wasn't just a summer story. It was part of who he was becoming, and maybe one day someone else would remember him as the one who took a stand.